Welcome back to Believe in Badgers on the Believe Network, presented by betonline.ag and Oakbridge Wealth Management. I'm Matt Perkins, joined, as always, by Badger legend, the Hebrew Hammer himself, Matt Bernstein. Bernie, how are we doing today?
Matt Perkins, man, every day with you is a great day. It's a holiday, as I like to say. So thanks for having me again, Matt Perkins, for our 250 something.
I think this might be 260. I think today might be
260. Yeah, I appreciate you keep coming back.
I appreciate you keep coming back, and we always appreciate having some new voices join us here on the podcast, especially people who can give us a little bit of an outside view of the Badgers. We can be a little bit insular here, Bernie, at times when it comes to Wisconsin. So today we have PFF's Max Chadwick. He is a college football analyst over at PFF and the host of the PFF College Football Show. Max, thanks so much for hanging out with us here today.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Honestly, it's really going to be cool to talk to some Badgers with you.
Yeah, man, we're really excited about it. I'm excited to talk to you about not just the Badgers, but the PFF system, which has kind of become the industry standard, sort of, and how you got there as well. Before we get into it with Max, though, want to remind everyone tuning in that we continue to be presented by betonline.ag, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, NHL, and more, head on over to BetOnline today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. And, of course, our main man, Chris Anicetti, and his team over at Oakbridge Wealth Management. If you are a pro, future pro, or current NCAA athlete with NIL deals, Chris Anicetti is the man that you need to connect with to get your money right. Over at Oakbridge, Chris and his team of professionals will create a comprehensive financial plan to set you up to navigate your lifestyle and future market conditions. Oakbridge specializes in wealth management for professional athletes. They understand all the pressures that they face on a day-to-day basis. Chris and his team will set you up with a bespoke plan to make your money work for you off the field so you can focus on what you do best, perform on the field. Get in touch with Chris on Instagram at OakbridgeWM_Anicetti. That's OakbridgeWM_ANICETE, or head on over to their website, OakbridgeWealthMGMT.com. Chris Anicetti, Oakbridge Wealth Management. Get your money right. A lot of players these days getting NIL deals, getting their money right before they leave college, Max. But we can talk about NIL a little bit later. We're here to talk Badgers first and foremost. Obviously, the news of the week. After the Oregon loss, Wisconsin fired Phil Longo, the offensive coordinator. So I want to ask you, so over the 2022-ish games that Phil Longo was the offensive coordinator this year and last year for Wisconsin, just what went wrong?
Yeah, they've had some issues throwing the football. I don't think that's really a surprise to anyone. Obviously, they brought in Tyler Van Dyke, hoping that those issues would be fixed. And unfortunately, he suffers a season-ending injury, and they are forced to start Braden Locke the rest of the year. I think it's two parts of, one, the quarterback play has not been good enough, and two, the receiving corps has not been good enough either. I think there's really kind of a lack of speed that they have in that receiving corps right now, a lack of guys that can get open on a consistent basis. That's really just kind of stalled this offense out. They've had some talented running backs. Obviously, Braylon Allen last year was a really talented player. He's obviously doing really well with the New York Jets right now as well. The offensive line has continued to be one of the better units that we have in college football. But the issue is when your quarterback play is not very good and your receiving core is not very good, you're going to have a lot of issues, creating a lot of explosive plays throwing the football. And if you can't do that offensively, there are very few offenses that can succeed in today's day and age of football without having an explosive passing attack, right? So Wisconsin, that's been a problem. I think it's a little bit in part due to coaching, but also I just think the talent acquisition offensively at the skill position players has just not been great, and at quarterback either. And maybe it would have been better with Tyler Van Dyke this year. I do like Van Dyke. He's a talented thrower, but unfortunately we couldn't see, obviously, with him going down with the season-ending injury and having to play Braden Locke the rest of the year. So I think it's really just looking at the quarterback and receiving core. That's kind of been what's going wrong for the last couple of years.
Max, I love that you mentioned the Jets, although I feel like I should take a shot of something disgusting when we talk about them. Talk about a team that's like imploding again after 30 years of implosions. Let's not go there because that's a deep, dark hole that I've been living in for a long time. Let's get to, dude, first off, again, Matt Perkins, we are the most insular people. Like, we are obsessed with the Badgers. We love them more than anything. They're the best thing in the world. Max, are you saying, at least this is what I'm hearing, is that if we had an explosive speedster in wide receiver that would completely change a lot of our offensive woes.
I think so. I think you need more than one. I think that's definitely something that you need. Just guys that get open, honestly. It's more than just being fast, right? You need guys that can separate and get open at a high level. There's a lot of guys in the NFL that aren't that fast that are still some of the best separators that we have in the NFL, right? Guys like Keenan Allen, for example. Keenan Allen's never been the fastest player in the NFL, but he is one of the best route runners in the league because of just, how smart he is and how he knows how to attack the leverages of defensive backs and all that. So Wisconsin's just missing that right now. And again, I do want to say the quarterback play has not been good enough either. But I do think the receiving corps has also played a part of it. I mean, right now, Wisconsin is 103rd in the country in terms of receiving grade so far this year. And they are, I believe, 118th in passing grade this year. So when you're 103rd and 118th and basically throwing the football, it's just not very good. It's not going to lead to a lot of success for them, honestly. So that's what's killed them, right? They were in a close game with Penn State a couple weeks ago, and the lack of passing game in the second half really killed them. They had a chance to beat the number one team in the country in Oregon this past weekend, and really the lack of passing game killed them again. If they had any sort of a competent passing game, I think Wisconsin could have had two major wins already, and Phil Longo probably would still have a job right now. But it's just the way it goes right now. Wisconsin's just kind of lacking in the quarterback and receiving corps department.
18 drops don't help either.
Yeah.
And I think that we've seen Will Pauling, who was the outstanding receiver last year, right? Who was, far and away the most productive guy. He's taken a step back this year. He's had a lot more drops. He has 8 drops on the season. And like you mentioned, they're not getting open. Is that just an athleticism thing, or is that a scheme thing as well?
I think it's a scheme thing. I think there's a guy like Andy Kotelnicki that I think Wisconsin fans would be over the moon with if they hired him, but he's not going to leave Penn State.
He's not leaving Penn State. No way.
No, exactly. I was reading some articles just trying to prepare for this, just saying, okay, who do they really are going after for OC? And I saw Andy Kotelnicki brought up, and I was like, there's no way he's leaving Penn State for Wisconsin. It's just for a lateral move, honestly. So, but that's a guy, though, that you look at what he did at Kansas, right? Kansas does not really have superstars at the receiving corps, but when he was the offensive coordinator there, they had the 3rd best receiving grade in the country behind Oregon and Washington last year. And Penn State went from the receiving corps being really bad and still is really bad. But he's at least scheming it up better. That way they're not horrible like they were last year, right? So it is scheme a little bit too. And I think that does go into Phil Longo and why he was ultimately terminated. But I do think there's also a talent thing that they're just missing as well, right? So it's 2 parts, right? This is not really one answer. You can say, oh, it's definitely a coaching issue, or no, it's a talent issue. It's a little bit of both for Wisconsin right now. So they already fired the offense coordinator and Phil Longo. They're going to hire a new one. Maybe he could help scheme open some guys, but also they got to recruit better, and they got to get some better receivers into this program, whether it be through high school recruiting or whether it be through the transfer portal as well. I think Wisconsin, really an area of focus for them is, 1, who's going to be the quarterback after this? And then 2, we got to get some difference makers in that receiving corps, or else you're going to see kind of the same offense probably next year.
Well, let's hope not. Max, I think Fickell has his guy already. I think it's set in stone. It just needs to wait a couple weeks to let it out. Do you think he has his guy? No matter who it is. We don't have to talk about the actual person, but do you think he has that person in mind?
Probably. I think, sometimes usually the best coaches usually whenever they make a move like firing an offensive coordinator, they usually, I know James Franklin said one time that he always has a running list of coaches for every position, right? So he's like, hey, if one of our guys leaves for a better job, or if we fire one of our guys, I always have a list of guys that I'm willing to go after. If you fire a guy and have no plan as to what you're going to do next, that's just bad leadership, honestly, right? And that's when programs go off the rails, is when you're just firing guys and they're like, all right, well, what's next? And you go, well, I don't know. Let's go see what happens, right? So he definitely has a list. I would imagine Luke Fickell, he's a great coach. He would have a list of guys that he has been eyeing potentially for a new offensive coordinator role, whether or not Phil Longo moved on to a better job or get fired like he just did. So I'm sure he's got a list of guys he's looking at already. He might already have his top candidate as well. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I'm sure Luke Fickell's got a short list of names already he's considering for this job.
Matt Perkins, Jason Eck. I'm throwing it out there.
Jason Eck from Idaho.
A lot of people have been throwing that name around. I don't know if that's true or not. Just a lot of people. He coached me. He was a GA, I think, when I was there. So people have been throwing that name around. I'm just saying.
Well, I was going to say, Max, let's put you in Coach Fickell's seat. Who are you targeting that is, obviously not Andy Kotelnicki, obviously not, some of those guys from the SEC whose salaries are ridiculous and they're probably not going to leave. Who are you targeting?
Yeah, I think one guy that I think a lot of Wisconsin fans have talked about recently that I wouldn't mind is Tom Herman. He just got fired as the FAU head coach. He and Fickell worked together on the Ohio State staff back in 2014. Obviously, his time as a head coach did not go well at all, whether it be at Texas or FAU, but he clearly was a good enough offensive coordinator to get a shot in the first place, right? So I think Tom Herman's a guy that obviously Luke Fickell is familiar with. That could be a guy that he goes after pretty quickly as a guy who's now on the market after being fired by FAU. So that could be a guy that I could see Luke Fickell going after. Ben Arbuckle, who's done a great job at Washington State with their offense. I think that's be another guy. You mentioned Jason Eck. I think that's also a really, really good candidate as well, the Idaho head coach. He's done a really, really good job of just obviously, coaching up that Idaho team. They have one of the best offenses probably in the FCS right now. Obviously, he played at Wisconsin as well. So that's another guy I think that is definitely an option. So, yeah, there's a bunch of them. I mean, Sean Lewis at San Diego State, their head coach, he has been an offensive coordinator before. I think he was at Colorado last year. He's obviously a good offensive mind. I think that could be an avenue as well. So, yeah, there's a lot of names. But I think Tom Herman, Jason Eck, like you said, those are the two that really kind of stuck out to me when I first heard about this opening.
So I personally don't see Sean Lewis. Bernie and I have had him on the show before, and he is someone who really wants to be a head coach. The Colorado stop for him was always a 1-year thing, no matter what. And so I there are a lot of fans who obviously would love Sean Lewis. I just personally don't see that happening given his demeanor and outlook and just kind of who he is. The one name that I was surprised he didn't mention was Gino Guidugli, the quarterbacks coach at Notre Dame, who we know has very close ties to Luke Fickell, was actually originally came over as the tight ends coach. And Fickell was originally hired at Wisconsin, was there for about 2 weeks before he got the job at Notre Dame. Could you see a reunion there happening?
Definitely. Yeah, it's another name that I just didn't bring up, but I can see that because obviously he worked with Luke Fickell for like 6 years at Cincinnati, right? So, I think he obviously was the offensive coordinator for Luke Fickell there for a year. I think he could be a guy that they look at. He's done a pretty decent job at Notre Dame, obviously as the quarterbacks coach, but they've had some Riley Leonard as a passer has not really impressed me that much this year. So if you're really looking to improve the passing game, like Guidugli has not really done an amazing job there, I thought, with Riley Leonard, but he is still a good offensive mind. I wouldn't be surprised because obviously a lot of these times when you're looking at who's going to be the next candidate for these jobs, you're looking at, okay, who has the head coach worked with before, right? And this obviously he's going to hire guys he's probably familiar with most of the time at least. So yeah, that's definitely a guy that I think they could definitely be going after. I know Mike Denbrock worked with Fickell for a long time too, but it's another guy like Andy Kolnicki. I just don't think he's leaving Notre Dame to go to Wisconsin to do the same job, honestly. So, but I can see Guidugli being one of the names that Fickell goes after, and he'd probably be a top 3 to 5 candidate right now for the job.
So, do you think, Max, the most important job description is to recruit quarterbacks, it's to build them, or is it to call the offense? I mean, at this point, to me, we need quarterbacks who we can coach and, create and evolve and can be consistent, and then I guess I'll ask a different question after.
Yeah, I think so. I think obviously it needs to be both. Honestly, I don't think you could just get a guy that's a great recruiter and then a guy that's not going to coach, call the plays, right? Because you need both. I mean, there's some as a head coach you could be that, right? As like a Deion Sanders, for example, like he is the CEO of Colorado. Is he really the X's and O's guy? No, but he has some really good coordinators doing that. But what Deion Sanders is going to do is get great players in there. As a head coach, you can do that. As a coordinator, you probably can't do that, especially as an offensive coordinator at Wisconsin, where Luke Fickell is obviously a defensive guy. You've got to be able to call the plays on the offense. You are running the offense, really. So you got to do both. You got to be able to get talented players in there and recruit. But that's really that falls on Fickell probably a lot more than so the coordinators. And maybe you could hire some assistant coaches under you that are excellent recruiters, right? So you could do that as well. Like Fran Brown, for example, the Georgia defensive backs coach. He was an ace recruiter. He's one of the best recruiters in the country, and really a big reason why Syracuse hired him to be their head coach after not being a coordinator ever before in his life, because they knew, hey, we just got to get talented players in here. And Fran Brown is that at a great level. So you can hire assistants under you that really handle recruiting a lot more than you do, and you just focus on really really just running the offense as much as an efficient rate as possible. But at the same time, you do need to, be able to bring in talented players and help bring in talented players. But ultimately, you got to be a great play caller first and foremost. And I think that's probably what Luke Fickell's looking for most in his new offensive coordinator. There's a lot of guys I think that will fit this role, but yeah, I do think he'll go outside. I think he'll go outside with a hire. I can see him going for a big splash. They need something. They need a big splash offensively, honestly, right now. And Luke Fickell, I think it's safe to say his time at Wisconsin has been a little disappointing so far, right? He's a guy that led Cincinnati to the college football playoff, got hired at Wisconsin. Wisconsin thought, okay, maybe we could compete with the big boys in the Big Ten right now, and it just hasn't really happened yet. So I think Luke Fickell, he's not on the hot seat. I'm not trying to say that yet, but if this offense continues to sputter out, there could be some talks, right? So I think this needs to be an ace hire. I think he needs to ace this hire, or else there could be some issue brewing in Madison.
So let's flip over to the defense, because that's been at least a little bit of a brighter spot this past week. But I listened to your show this week, and you mentioned that the Badgers DBs played really, really well against Oregon, despite Wisconsin not really having a pass rush. Just looking at the PFF grades, 7 of the top 10 graded defenders on Wisconsin, who meet the minimum snap limit are defensive backs. What makes this unit so good and rate out so highly for you at PFF?
Yeah, their secondary, we knew this going into the year, was the best part of the team, honestly. Ricardo Hallman's a great corner. You got Hunter Waller's one of the better safeties in college football. And right now they're 16th in the nation in coverage grade this year, right? So their secondary is quite easily the best part of the entire team, offensively or defensively. The secondary has been the best unit for them. So that's not surprising. We kind of knew that going into the year. The front seven has had some issues. Right now they're 117th in run defense grade. And then they are 70th in pass rushing grade. So they're below average in pass rushing, and they're well below average, one of the worst in the country right now in terms of defending the run, in terms of our grading system. But secondary in the coverage unit has been outstanding, right? So that's really been the area that Wisconsin's really excelled at the most. And honestly, that's one of the biggest reasons why Wisconsin is 5-5 right now and not having a worse record. I think the secondary has done an amazing job of just limiting big plays. And like a team like Oregon, who just ran up and down the field against Ohio State, one of the best defenses in America, they couldn't do that against Wisconsin, right? And that's because Wisconsin's got a really, really damn good secondary that really played at a very high level against the Oregon receivers, who are very good in their own right. So yeah, the secondary, I think, has been quite easily the best part of the Badgers this year.
Max, let's take a step back for a second. Can you tell everyone who might not know what PFF is? What is it used for? Why is it important? Obviously statistics are now changing everything in this world. I'm not a math guy. I'm not even a smart guy. But Max, just hit me off with the keep it simple, stupid, what the PFF is for.
Yeah, so we try to do the impossible task of grading every single player on every single play in every single game, whether that be at the NFL level, whether that be at the FBS level, the FCS level, even some D2, CFL, UFL, everything. We do everything. So we do that. And I think that, and obviously I will always say the grades are not always perfect. I won't ever say the grades are perfect, right? But our graders are trained at a very, very high level by people who have either coached in the game or played in the game or been in the game for a very long time to know what they're looking for, right? So we kind of understand schemes at a pretty good level, that we kind of understand what a player's job is on any given play, right? There's sometimes where we get a play wrong, for example, and again, they're not always perfect, but we do grade those players on every play in every game for every team. So that's kind of been something that we've done that's kind of like revolutionized a lot of looking at players in a different light. Because before it was like, okay, who's the best quarterback in the country? I don't know, who has got the most passing yards or who has the most passing touchdowns, right? That's not really a great way to look at it, right? So that's how we kind of try to change this. Okay, how are they actually doing? Like, what are they doing? Are they going above and beyond their job requirement? Are they meeting their job requirement, or are they well below what their job requirement is, right? So that's been kind of how we've been going about it. And then those grades are ultimately made into a 0 to 100 scale to make it more digestible, right? So obviously, the closer you are to 100, the better of a player you are, and the closer to 0 you are, the worse of a player you are. So that's kind of how we go about it. And yeah, it's a very long task. Obviously, there's a lot more stats that we have than just the grades that we have. But those are kind of the most front-facing stat that we have is the PFF grades. But a lot goes into it, obviously, and it's why I think it's one of the better metrics to look at when you're trying to evaluate a team holistically.
And so when you say the Badgers pass rush is 70th. Is that a combined average of all, or is it just you take all the players, you average them out, or is it just the team grade?
Yeah, it's kind of it's all the players that go into it in total. And then obviously it matters how many snaps they play as well. So like if one player has say like a 30 pass rushing grade, which would be terrible, but he's only played 20 snaps this year, that's not going to affect the pass rushing grade as much, right? The guys who play the most are going to affect the grade the most, right? So as a team at least. So that's kind of how what goes into it. So they're 70th total in pass rushing grade, about at 69.6 is what their pass rushing grade as a team is this year. And that's right now 70th in college football out of 134 teams. So right around average, right? In the grand scheme of things in college football. So yes, 70th in the nation. That's kind of where they are.
So your statistics skills must be off the charts.
Yeah, I wasn't great at stats in college. Fortunately, I'm not the one grading it or making these algorithms or anything like that. Because if it was, then the grading scale would be horrible and they wouldn't be reliable at all. Because I'm pretty bad at math myself. But I am able to at least understand what these statistics mean enough to go on the shows like these and write about it and talk about them.
Max, do you know like we have Clint on the show, who was a heavy recruiter. You know, we have people who do different things around football. Do coaches call you? Do they get a subscription? Like, how do they use it to better the teams to better their teams?
Yeah, I can tell you right now, every single team in the NFL and every single, or I think all but 2 teams in the FBS are clients of ours.
Okay.
And they pay significantly more than what the consumer is paying for PFF. Like they're paying a lot of money for these grades. So so that should show you right there. Like, if you don't think our stuff is worth it, well, every team in college football in the NFL practically is using our stuff at a much higher level than what the consumer is offered, at least at PFF. So, every team uses it in college football in the NFL to varying degrees. Obviously, they're not always going to just go strictly off. They have their own, obviously, processes, but we are a tool that every single team in college football in the NFL use in terms of game planning, in terms of evaluating their own roster, in terms of evaluating free agents in the transfer portal, in terms of evaluating just everything, and for the draft especially as well, for teams looking at who their good prospects. They use PFF grades a lot in there. So every single team in the NFL is a client, and almost every I believe 2. I can't tell you the 2 off the top of my head, but I think all but 2 of the 134 FBS teams are a client, and most of the FCS is a client as well. So every single team pretty much uses PFF.
The good old days of the magnetic names moving up a board is completely done now with all the statistics and everything that goes into football or any sport. I mean, look at Moneyball, right? Like that was the whole that book is, or that team movie or whatever, is the whole reason that you can win in different ways. It's crazy, but I do love that there's a grading system that says, hey, this is an area that you might really want to look at, and I don't say it justifies like what we've been saying, Matt Perkins, but it does say like, dang, you guys really need to go to the transfer portal and or recruit. I'd rather it be recruiting and take a couple years, because then you build a culture than just getting dudes in and dudes out. But man, what you guys do is really cool.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. And that is a big part of it is the portal. And obviously we don't have high school grades, and we actually tried to do high school grades one time, and it was just such a disaster. It's like, it's just impossible to do. Because obviously the level of play in high school varies wildly from county to county even. Like, so that's just, it's almost impossible to do high school grades. So we'll never get into recruiting too much, but transfer portal though, we got that covered, and it's important. And that's become a huge part of college football nowadays. And how I kind of compare it to is like the NFL, or really any sport, where you say, okay, you want to build the core of your roster through recruiting, through the draft, for professional teams, but you got to fill it out through the free agency as well, right? You can't be a team that just does not sign free agents in the NFL. You got to sign free agents to plug holes in your roster, like a lot of schools do right now. And there's some schools like Clemson that just refuse to use the portal at all. Then they're struggling because of it, right? They went from a national title contender every year before the transfer portal really boomed, and now they're a top 20, top 15 team every year, right? They're like still good because they still recruit at a high level and they still coach at a high level, but they're not using the portal at all, and that's kind of been hurting them a lot lately, right? So you got to do both, obviously, and you can't really just lean on one solely, more over the other. You got to do a little bit of both. But I think it is definitely an important part, and we'll see what Wisconsin does in the transfer portal this offseason.
So one of the things that I really like about PFF is it gives also the alignment counts for players, especially on defense, where they're being lined up. A, that's just really cool. B, I find it very useful as a fan to sort of understand what they're trying to scheme. And part of the issue for Wisconsin this year, as Bernie and I have talked about ad nauseum here, is that, especially against a team like Iowa, they're only using 2 down linemen on like 80% of the plays. Like, can Wisconsin legitimately try to run this 2-4-5? They're calling it a 3-3-5. It's a 2-4-5 or a 4-2-5 or whatever you want to call it. Can they keep trying to run this scheme and be successful in the Big Ten?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like that's been kind of surprising as well. And I know they still line up guys over the edge that aren't technically down linemen, but like
no, they're outside linebackers on the they're all listed as outside linebackers.
Right, exactly. And they're still rushing, but like, yeah, it's like in the Big Ten, especially, it's like, dude, you gotta have beef out there, right? And that's why you can see their passes are great and run defense great are so bad, or at least below average. It's like part of that is not even like that's obviously talent is an issue as well, but a lot of it, like you just said, is due to scheme. Right, and the fact that they're not really putting too much resources into stopping the run or defending or getting after the passer. And in the Big Ten, especially, you got to do that. I mean, there's a lot of schools that in the Big Ten that just want to run the football a lot, and at the same time, like then you don't want to have 7-8 guys back there in the secondary. You want to have guys up front that can stop the run. So that is an important part. I think they might need to consider changing it up a little bit, just because in terms of the philosophies that a lot of offenses have in the Big Ten of wanting to just run the football down your throat, and Wisconsin's only got 2 down linemen on there. It's a little weird. Yeah, I don't know if Luke Fickell will change that at all, but that might be a big reason why their run defense has struggled at times this year.
Oh no, they got to change it. I used to text Jimmy Leonard, dude, stop putting 2 guys down on the field and put in 3 line deep. But as you said, Max, the beef. Dude, no matter if you have 5 linemen or 6 linemen with a tight end, like you got to stop the run. Mm-hmm. And 5 guys against 2 is not fair. Like it's just not a situation that a defense should be caught in. And having 2 outside linebackers, I even said it. One guy doesn't count if you're doing the read, right? Like you're not blocking them anyway. So you're doing 5 against 3 is not fair.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you have enough guys. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you, but I was just gonna say, it's like Wisconsin. I just feel like it's got to kind of get back to their old school ways of just like we're gonna just try to beat you up, right? We're gonna try to beat you up in the offensive line. We're trying in our run game, and we're trying to beat you up with our defensive line, right? So that's physicality has been like the MO of Wisconsin, and now they're trying to get a little more finesse in there with obviously Phil Longo and his whole air raid offense that he kind of brought in, trying to modify it a little bit to Wisconsin as well. But I think they got to get back to the roots. Now, do they have to just run the ball every single freaking play like they did, back then with Jonathan Taylor and Melvin Gordon and Monte Ball and all the other great running backs they have? Maybe not. But I do think, relying on that offensive line, relying on a good run game, and then relying on play action off that run game, and then defensively just pound them in the trenches as well with having a good secondary behind you that can hold up as well. Yeah, it's important. And I think that, getting back to that mentality of being a physical football team, that's what made Wisconsin a top 15, 20 program in the first place. And maybe getting away from that mentality is what's not made them that right now, which is kind of surprising considering like Luke Fickell is a guy that you would think would want to just be extremely physical in all aspects of the game, considering, the teams he had at Cincinnati and just kind of the coach he is overall. But they kind of got away with it right now. They're playing too much finesse ball, I think, right now at Wisconsin, which at times can work. But for a school like that, I think just getting back to that mentality of we're just going to try to beat you up and be a heavyweight boxing match. That's kind of what Wisconsin's been great at in recent years. I think they kind of try to get back to that, in my opinion.
So, Max, you're sitting in the defensive room with all the coaches, and you're in there and you're like, okay, guys, we need this one position. We need one player. Who's that player for you to make this defense well-rounded?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what the portal looks like. I can't really tell you just yet who the top guys will be that Wisconsin should go after, but I just think getting guys in the middle of that defensive line, D-tackle on edge as well, and even a linebacker. I mean, they're pretty good in the secondary, and we'll see what happens with some guys that leave for the NFL draft or graduate or whatever, and maybe even out of their portal. But I just would attack the front 7 really hard and just be like, we got to get better at defending the run, and we've got to get better at rushing the passer right now. Because if we could do that defensively, and we still have have a great secondary next year. We could have an elite defense in college football. So I think just getting, like I said before, the beef, right? Get the beef up front, get the D tackles, get the edge rushers. Those are the important guys I think they really need right now, just to be able to stop the run and rush the passer a little bit better.
So wait, Matt Burgers, I have one more question. Max, your honest opinion. You're saying get the beef. So we need probably, let's say, 3 guys, right? 2 middle, 2 nose tackle, let's say 2 tackles and middle backer-ish.
Mm-hmm.
How important now has NIL become with actually achieving these goals?
It's critical. It's absolutely critical. I think there's some schools that you can see, like Ohio State, that can go out with $20 million and buy a championship roster immediately, right? Like getting guys like Caleb Downs, like Coach Judkins, and just a bunch, Will Howard, a bunch of stars. And then there's other schools that just don't have the money and the funds to do it, and they struggle because of it. And there's some big time programs that don't have that type of money. Like Penn State, for example, is like obviously like a top 10, top 15 program, but in terms of NIL right now, they're well behind the rest of them right now. And I think, people try to ask me, okay, what was the difference in the Penn State Ohio State game? Like, was it the Ohio State secondary, being able to shut down? I'm like, yeah, look, you want to talk about on field, great. The difference to me was that the money. Penn State does not have the money, they don't have the talent to compete right now. It's kind of with Ohio State. So they're getting it better at that. Penn State is, and I think Wisconsin's trying to get better at that as well. But there is kind of some teams are just spending more right now. And now that it's legal in college football, it's the Wild West right now. And it's like, all right, if you don't have the money, you're not going to be able to compete in a lot of ways. So, I do think NIL is critical nowadays. And, there's some times like Wisconsin, and I think PFF is valuable for them because there's a lot of guys that from the FCS, for example, that maybe aren't commanding that much money in terms of NIL that are in the portal. And Wisconsin can say, hey, this guy played really well at the Group 5 level or the FCS level. We can get them for pennies on the dollar compared to the other top, Alabama guys that were backups at Alabama that are commanding a lot of money in the portal. Let's go after those guys. Let's go after the underrated guys that maybe aren't going to cost us that much money to bring them in there. So that's why I think, a resource like us could be very valuable because we can tell you exactly who those FCS guys are, who those Group of 5 guys are that are kind of going under the radar right now, but are grading out very well in our system that maybe can make the jump to the Big Ten level and, play at a very high level as well. So I think Wisconsin is one of those programs that probably, isn't going to be able to go after the big names in the transfer portal. But if they can make their mark with some of the smaller, underrated guys that maybe won't cost as much money, that's the avenue that I probably would go with.
We need the walk-on culture of the transfer portal. Like we need the dudes who are going to come in for no money who we could just make into JJ Watts.
Well, yeah. they did hit. Their biggest transfer hit this year was on the defensive line. That's Elijah Hills, the defensive tackle, who's been the most disruptive lineman they've had by far this season. And he's been one of the lone bright spots from the portal with the Tyler Van Dyke injury. But, you talk about addressing, especially defensive line in the portal. Defensive line and edge players after quarterbacks are probably the most expensive guys to get in terms of NIL because those body types are rare. And I think that makes it, doubly tough for some of these coaches and some of these programs to get these guys because, those big body types don't grow on trees, as Clint likes to say. And so those guys are the ones who command the most money. And that's why you see, guys, Walter Nolan going from one big money program to Mississippi, but he got a bag to go to Mississippi and things like that. So, as much as they want to do that, how viable is that for a team like Wisconsin that doesn't have the big NIL resources? Is it just like mining those, the FCS level, or is there a way for them to, find that talent on the defensive line, on the edge, finding, I don't know. I just don't know how to get it, man, without like the big NIL funds. Is there a way to do it?
Yeah, I think obviously you want to, for them, coaching is huge, and then you want to bring in guys from high school recruiting that you can coach up and eventually become those dudes, right, for you. But also, like I said, there are guys that really do go under the radar that just, nobody really notices that much. And I think I like Walter Nolan, who was the number 1 recruit in the country. That's not possible for Wisconsin, right? That's the guy that everyone kind of knew as a stud, and he was a good player at A&M. Now he's a great player at Ole Miss, and he, like I said, he was the number 1 recruit over Travis Hunter coming out of high school, actually. So he was a guy that was like, okay, well, nobody's going to be able to spend enough to get him unless you're a big time school, right? So that's one guy. But Wisconsin, like I said, there are guys out there though. There are FCS players that can play at the Big Ten level. There are group of 5 players that can play at the Big Ten level. They're just not, known players right now. They're not known commodities. And if you're not really a known commodity, maybe you won't cost as much in the transfer portal. So that's where they should be, mining right now. They should be looking for those kind of guys that, can come in. And I don't he did go to a big time program. So I don't want to say he didn't cost money, but Braden Fisk, for example, he was a guy who we at PFF identified when he was at Western Michigan, and he was a great player at Western Michigan. And when he entered the portal, he wasn't really getting that much love coming into the portal. And we're like, no, this guy is grading out at a super high level. Obviously, going from the MAC to the ACC at Florida State is a whole big jump, but we think he could play at a very high level. And he played great at Florida State, and he was a second-round pick by the Rams, and now he's balling out in his rookie year, right? So there are those guys that are out there right now. And again, Fisk might have cost more than your average guy, but there are guys like that out there. There really are. And I think there's a lot of people who kind of just consider, well, the great players always go to the Power 4 teams, and never anything else. Well, no, sometimes guys go under the radar in high school, and they don't get the offers they deserve, and they have to go to a group of 5 or FCS team, and they ball out there, and then they eventually become great players, and they can transfer up and all that. So that's what happens sometimes. JJ Watt did it, right? Central Michigan to Wisconsin, and obviously he's one of the greatest defensive players we have in NFL history. So there are those guys out there. Honestly, there really are. And, it's just about finding them and making sure you can get them in your building, and then eventually turning them into stars and, helping out your defense and then making them future NFL players. So there are guys like that out there that really ball out in the FCS and ball out the group of 5 level and just need a shot at the Power 4, honestly. And Wisconsin's a very, very good program that I'm sure a lot of guys will be willing to go to, even if there isn't a massive NIL bag waiting for them in Madison. So I think that's where Wisconsin has to live right now. And that's, if I'm Wisconsin and I'm working at the recruiting department, I am really, really focusing on every single player entering the portal and seeing where the diamonds in the rough are they can get in there.
All right. So before we finish off with some rapid fire questions, Max, where can people find you online?
Yeah, you can find them all. Me at CFB Max Chadwick, my new Twitter now. You can find right there, and then also the PFF College Football Show. If you want to watch it on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts, we do reviews, previews, and then I was during the portal season, we're covering that a lot as well, and trying to find for Wisconsin fans some of those diamonds in the rough that could be available in the transfer portal. So yeah, PFF College Football Show, and if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at CFB Max Chadwick.
And we'll definitely be linking those in the show notes. Bernie, what are you going to say?
I was going to say, Max, we need to give you some NIL money to give Wisconsin those diamonds in the rough. How much do you want?
They have the same database I do. They got the same database that I have access to. So maybe I'm sure.
I don't want that. I want you to literally call Fickle and be like, hey, dude, here are these 3 guys I think are going to be the next, who knows, Deion Sanders, Randy Moss. Who else? Like Quinnen Williams. Like, we need dudes.
Yeah, and they're out there, man. They are out there. Again, I don't know if they'll.
I'll give you his number. You just call him up.
Okay. I'll be awesome. I
Matt
would love
Bernstein
to help out.
Said he'd give me $50,000 for you to get these inside people's names.
Okay.
Listen, I can say anything anymore. There's no law in this world. So we can pay whoever we want.
It's absolutely the Wild West. It's absolutely the Wild West.
It's insane. Yeah.
It's insane.
It's nuts.
Wait, let me ask one more question, Max. I know we're running out. Matt Perkins loves his lightning round, which
you do too. Don't go.
I'm not. I love it. I'm not yicking your yum, Matt Perkins. I also love you, so I don't want to get off the Zoom so fast. Max, broad. What fixes the NIL? Is there a fix?
It feels like we're down a rabbit hole that we almost can't get out of at this point.
Just one thing you might think could change the complete lunacy of NIL and transfer portal.
I think more laws need to be put in place just to make it not as extreme as it is. I don't know if you ever get to the salary cap kind of era that we have in the NFL or anything like that. I know some people have talked about that. I just don't know how possible that is really in college football. I do think some measures need to be taken just to make it more easier. One thing I will do is to make it a little less extreme is you need to have contracts. These guys need to be under contract because there's some guys like say Matt Sluka at UNLV, the quarterback this year, who was promised $100,000. He gets to UNLV and they go, well, we have $3,000 for you. And he goes, all right, well, I quit then. And that was a big story, right? UNLV's starting quarterback at 3 games of the season goes, well, I quit, right? So That's a problem right now, is that there are guys that are getting promises that they just schools can't keep up with, right? There's Jaden Rashada, the recruit 2 years ago, went to Florida. They promised him $14 million as a high school football recruit. And they got there. And he's like, yeah, we have nothing close to that for you. Sorry. And he goes, all right, well, I'm going to Arizona State. And now he's at Georgia now, right? So I think contracts are critical right now. I think there needs to be pen on paper saying, hey, we will pay you this amount of money, but you also need to play for us as well. You can't just quit and we'll pay you the same amount of money. Is critical, because I think players are getting screwed over right now. Teams are getting screwed over right now. It's just insane. So I think contracts, there's a lot of handshake agreements right now that just aren't, happening and aren't coming to fruition. I think contracts are critical for the next wave of NIL, I would say.
That guy's going to sue UNLV. He's going to make away with more than $100,000.
Yeah, probably. Right. It's insane.
They should have just paid him $100,000 to leave.
Well, the problem is for him, though, is like, even if he sues him, there's no contract. There's no writing.
But if there's any email, if there's anything that says,
right. It's insane.
Listen, Matt Perkins, it might not be like the most biggest fact, but someone in the jury box or whatever is going to be like, listen, that kid was promised X and they gave him $3,000. There'll be proof that he was paid. So dude, I don't write anything in an email because I don't trust anybody anymore. But I'm sure, listen, yes, I think contracts, my thing, Matt Perkins, I want you to answer is multi-year contracts. The question and we're not going down this, is maybe not right out of the gate, because second year contracts or second contracts in the NFL where people make money. So I don't know how you do it, but multi-year. As a fan, I want to see someone wearing the Motion W for 2, 3, 4 years.
Right.
Like, we're just not seeing that. Half the dudes, Hunter Wohler is like some of the only names I could remember on defense, coming back for like multiple years. It's crazy. And so I think from the fan experience as well, it's not as great as it used to be. But I think contracts is the only thing. I don't care about the cap, because if you get a guy 3 years and he's turns out to be Ron Dane, I don't care where it goes his fourth year. We had him for 3.
Yeah.
I have my answer to all of it is 4 words: players union, collective bargaining.
Yeah.
So that's all I'm going to say about the matter.
Competitive 401k.
I mean, you know what? Why not? They need to get medical and dental.
I'm just saying what every company says when you go in there. Like, hey, we got a really competitive 401k. Like, great.
They should.
I know.
They should.
I just think it's such a funny thing. They should be getting
that money for giving their body to the university.
Listen, I don't disagree. Also, I think they should put in contracts, you're paying for my medical bills, that if anything happened in college, you will pay for it for the rest of your life. My back surgery should be paid for by Wisconsin, and it wasn't. That's all I'm going to say. Matt Perkins, lightning round. Let's not get into that either.
We will get into it here. Okay, I'm going to start. Biggest game of the weekend is Ohio State, Indiana. What's your prediction for that?
I think Ohio State wins by multiple scores. I think Indiana, there is something to be said about their schedule this year being very easy. But I do think Indiana's a very good team. I think Ohio State wins by 13 overall. Now, their center being out for the season and their left tackle being out for the season, it's big because Indiana's pass rush is pretty good. But I do think that they have the weaponry, and Will Harrison playing out of his mind lately. I think their defense is outstanding as well. They'll beat Indiana. I think 34-21 was my official prediction for that.
I've got a lower scoring game. I've got 24-10 Ohio State. I think Kirk Cignetti is going to try to deflate the ball as much as possible and just run it and just keep running the ball to shorten that game. Second question: if the Heisman vote was today, who are you voting for?
Travis Hunter. He is just one of the most rare football players I've ever seen. Honestly, he's a top 10 receiver in the country and probably top 5 corner in the country. That's insane right now. And now I think Ashton Ginty's got a very good case. And if you say Ashton Ginty, I'm like, yeah, I totally get it. But to me, it's those two and everyone else right now. And my vote right now would go to Travis Hunter.
Yeah,
I would agree.
Yeah,
the dude plays both ways in college football.
He plays like 120 snaps a game. It's out of this
world.
He's
elite at both. Like that, people are like,
and he's elite at both.
He's like, oh, he's okay at one. Like, no, he's elite at both. Like, he is a fantastic player at both, playing 120 snaps a game. Yeah, and he's playing for a potential playoff team in Colorado as well. Like, yeah, I think Travis Hunter should be the Heisman.
And he's on what do they call it? He's like always on TV. He's always being shown. He's always
making plays. But that's
what I'm saying. He's not only playing at a high level under the radar. He is all over the radar. He's on every TV, every social media platform, and the dude is playing better than anyone else in the country. and everyone watches him. Like, I can't see how he wouldn't win. The dude, I don't like Colorado because they're too flashy for me, but like, he deserves everything he gets.
And Heisman is always about like to me, it's like, all right, who had the most memorable season? Like, we're gonna look back like years from now and be like, remember when Travis Hunter did that? Like, remember how insane that was? Like, yeah, JT's having a great year as well. And I think if a quarterback wins it this year, it'll be a sham. There's no quarterback even close to what those two are doing this year, in my opinion. But I think when you have two guys like Hunter, people are like, oh, he's having like a Charles Woodson season. Like, hell no, he's not. Charles Woodson did not do this kind of stuff. Like, Charles Woodson was played packages at receiver, but not this much. And Travis Hunter is like the best two-way player I think we've ever seen in college football.
I thought the best two-way player I'd ever seen before this was either Chris Gamble or Champ Bailey. Champ Bailey's probably the only other one to me that's sort of like on this level, but he didn't play nearly as many snaps on offense.
Bailey had 600 yards receiving his best year, and Hunter's going to have like 1,200 this year.
Yeah, it's absolutely
country. Yeah,
it's absolutely out of this world. Building off of that, who's the most impressive player you've ever seen in person?
Oh, in person. Okay.
Because it's different watching it on TV than watching it in person. Because I remember, quick tangent, I went to the Bills-Titans game a couple of years ago. And I saw Jordan Phillips in person. And if you don't know Jordan Phillips, defensive tackle, he is a mountain of a man. I didn't think they grew human beings to be that tall and that square, but not fat. It was, I was just absolutely blown away.
That's a good question. I actually, just telling you, I've been a lifelong Penn State fan my entire life. I actually was there for the Monte Ball record game at Penn State when he broke the record. So that was cool. But Saquon Barkley, I've seen in person a lot. He was unfreaking believable. And then the other one is Micah Parsons, the linebacker at Penn State. I went to the Cotton Bowl against Memphis. That would have been the best defensive game I've ever seen a player have. So he was all over the field, making plays on every single play with Micah Parsons. He had like 3 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, almost had an interception as well. I mean, he was all over the place. I think Micah Parsons and Saquon Barkley is just a Penn State fan. Those are two that just, for me, are just well above everyone else right now.
I have to bring in something completely random. David Deal, remember the guy for the Giants tackle?
Yeah.
Matt Perkins, do you remember that guy?
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
I played in a flag football game with him once. Flag for like a tournament. And he was not like fantastic skill-wise, but just like build, scarability. Like, that's not a PFF thing, but like, dude, when we went out there and someone's like had to someone's like, oh, that didn't happen, he would be like, oh, it happened. Or like, no, you didn't get 10 yards. Or like, no, we got 10 yards. Like, that dude like exudes like bully, and I like absolutely loved it. It just played flag football with him, and he was. So those guys, I agree, are all scary, and I absolutely love. Like, I loved every second of being around that guy.
Yeah.
All right. That's one we're going to get you out of here on. Your score prediction for Wisconsin, Nebraska this weekend.
Ooh. I think Wisconsin's going to win. I'll say 24-20 Wisconsin over Nebraska. I think Riley has some issues this year, and I'm worried about him against that secondary. So I think Wisconsin will find a way to pull it out against Nebraska.
I've got Wisconsin 27-17.
Fair. Yeah, it should be a little low scoring. So I completely understand that.
I think both these offenses are struggling. It's just with a new play caller, we don't know what to expect. Like, we really don't know what to expect. I think the one thing I can think of, Bernie, is they're going to run the ball more. Like, they are going to. I think they're going to
have to.
I think they're going to run the ball even more. I think they're going to try to load up. I see heavy sets. I see some 2 tight end sets. I see them just trying to get more physical, because I think that's what Luke Fickell ultimately wants to do, and I think that was part of the tension between Longo and Fickell.
If I just had to take a shot in the dark, it would be you take the best of the passing game, you cut away all the other stuff you did not like or don't do well, right? Like, your grade on whatever this play is, nope, that play's gone. You're never going to look at that again. We're going to do the 20, 30 pass plays we like, the 3 screens we like. We're not having 15 screens. We're going to have 3. And then I think you will see a more heavy run set. Maybe at 1 tight end down would be nice sometimes. I think you'll see people in the box, because that's how you block more people, right? I think you might see motion. You might see Jackson Aker as like a fullback, the Riley Novakowski as like a fullback. I think you got to do something like that to at least give our backs a little more running lanes. And also it gives the coordinator now who, you got to really come in and clean up a huge mess, give him some stability, cut away all the things you don't like, take your top 50% plays and just run with that.
Definitely. All right. Well, we hope that you guys enjoy the Nebraska game out there. Obviously, we're hoping the Badgers win. We want to thank Max Chadwick so much again for hanging out with us here today. This was a very, very informative conversation that we have had. And as always, you guys over at PFF doing great work. Make sure to follow Max on all the socials. And we appreciate everyone tuning in to Believe in Badgers on the Believe Network, presented by betonline.og and Oak Bridge Wealth Management. Until next time, on Wisconsin.
On Wisconsin.